What's up guys, Lon here from Android Authority, and with the Nexus 5X and Moto X Pure Edition being offered at very close price points, it's almost a no-brainer to put these two head to head, but which one is the better deal? Let's find out with the Nexus 5X versus the Moto X Pure Edition. Even though there's only a small difference in price between these two phones, there's a huge difference when it comes to design and build materials. The Nexus 5X is meant to be a direct successor to the Nexus 5, and it definitely shows with the all-plastic build. If you love the look and feel of the original Nexus 5, then you'll feel right at home with the 5X. It's super lightweight, easy to use in one hand, and it's very comfortable to hold due to the matte finish, rounded corners, and slightly tapered back. The Moto X is naturally the larger device out of the two because of its larger screen size, but it's also the more substantial feeling phone. Its metal frame gives it a rigidity that you just can't get with plastic, and the curved body lets it rest nicely in the hand. It's not the easiest phone to use in one hand, but because of its thin side bezels and small top and bottom chin, you might be surprised that it's quite manageable, and if you opt for the textured silicone back, you're getting a phone that doesn't feel like a slippery bar of soap. Nexus phones typically only come in the standard black and white colors, but this year Google threw in a new blue color to spice things up a bit for the 5X, but this still pales in comparison to the endless options that are available for the Moto X via Moto Maker. On top of a variety of standard colored backs, you also have the option of wood and leather, but it doesn't end there. You can pick from different accent colors and add your own engravings and greetings to truly make it your own. The 5X and Moto X Pure are both using LCD technology for the displays, but the Moto X's screen is a half an inch larger at 5.7 inches over the 5X's 5.2 inch screen, and it's also packing more resolution at 2560 by 1440 over the 1080p panel of the 5X. The 5X's display is no slouch with great viewing angles and solid color reproduction, and overall is a pretty good looking 1080p panel, but it just can't stack up to the Moto X's sharper, more vibrant, and brighter display, and the larger screen real estate just makes it much more enjoyable when it comes to things like watching video or playing games. The Nexus 5X's display is by no means a bad display, but when you compare these two side by side, it's pretty clear who the winner is. Taking a look at the internals, the 5X and Moto X are actually very similarly spec'd. The 5X is running on a Snapdragon 808 processor with 2 gigs of RAM, and on the Moto X you have the same Qualcomm chip, but you're getting an extra gigabyte of RAM for a total of 3 gigabytes. Even though the Moto X has the slight edge here, I honestly don't notice much of a difference in day-to-day use, as both devices are extremely fast, and things like gaming and multitasking haven't been an issue on either one. The fact that both of these devices are running stock Android, well, near stock Android in the case of the Moto X, also helps a ton in terms of overall stability and fluidity, and because these two phones are sold free of carriers, you're not having to deal with any carrier bloat to slow things down either. If you're curious about benchmarks, in Geekbench you'll notice that there's not any real differences in how these two score, and this pretty much falls in line with how both of these devices feel in daily use, which is not a huge surprise considering they're both being powered by the same chipset, running at the same exact clock speed. There's a couple new pieces of hardware on this year's Nexus phones, with the first one being on the bottom, and that's the USB Type-C port. It's reversible, and that makes life a whole lot easier over the standard micro USB on the Moto X, but until more devices, and by more devices I mean computers, laptops, etc., not just smartphones, adopt USB Type-C, it's currently more of a disadvantage than an advantage over the standard micro USB. The second new piece of hardware is on the back of the 5X, and that is the built-in fingerprint sensor, which the Moto X doesn't have either, and with fingerprint sensors being the new smartphone trend, it's surprising Motorola has yet to join in. If you're into biometric security, you'll love the fingerprint sensor on the 5X. It's extremely fast, conveniently located, and is one of the most accurate fingerprint sensors that I've ever used. Even the setup process takes very little time, and it's somewhat of a shame that when the Moto X gets the Marshmallow update, it won't be able to take advantage of the native fingerprint sensor integration. The Moto X does, however, get the leg up in storage capacity. You're getting 3 storage options on the Moto X with 16, 32, or 64 gigs, whereas with the 5X you only have the choice of 16 or 32. Not only does the Moto X come in a higher storage capacity, but it also supports micro SD card expansion, a feature Google ditched on the Nexus line a long time ago. 16 gigs is not a lot of storage and shouldn't even exist in 2015, but with a micro SD card slot you can probably get by just fine on the Moto X, but with the Nexus 5X you're honestly better off getting the 32GB version, especially if you plan on taking advantage of features like 4K 4K video recording. For the battery, you're looking at a 2700 mAh battery on the 5X and a slightly larger 3000 mAh battery on the Moto X. Both of these devices are capable of lasting a full day in my experience, but the 5X's battery life can definitely be stretched out further due to Marshmallow's battery saving feature called Doze, which creates for a much better standby time by putting the phone in a deep sleep and limiting app activity. Now the phone comes with wireless charging, but they do support fast charging, and while fast charging is amazing, it shouldn't be a permanent crutch for less than desirable or average battery life, but it is very convenient. The Moto X charges rapidly through Motorola's turbo power charger, whereas the Nexus 5X utilizes fast charging through its USB Type-C cable, and because of how quickly these two phones charge, it's very easy to get back up and running even after just 10 to 15 minutes of being plugged in. Nexus phones have never really been known for their cameras, and historically they've been some of the weakest cameras on the market. Coincidentally, the same can be said for the Moto X line, but both Google and Motorola put their best foot forward this year to make sure their flagships could keep up with the rest of the competition. The Nexus 5X has a brand new Sony-made 12.3 megapixel sensor, laser-guided autofocus, f2.0 aperture, and a very large pixel size of 1.55 microns for improved performance, especially in low light. The Moto X has a 21 megapixel sensor, phase detection autofocus, and features the same f2.0 aperture. Neither have optical image stabilization, and in the 5X's case, Google claims that the larger pixel size should more than make up for it. The camera software isn't spectacular on either one, but the dedicated on-screen shutter button makes the Google Camera app much easier and more intuitive to use over the tap-to-shoot method of Motorola's. The 5X's camera can be quickly launched with a double tap of the power button, which is convenient, but this trick isn't anything new to Motorola, and you can pretty much do the same thing with a double twist of the wrist. Both of these cameras are capable of recording 4K video and slow motion video at 120 frames, and while the 5X produces better colors and sharper looking video over the Moto X, it gets super shaky from doing something as simple as casually walking, while the Moto X maintains a much more stable and smoother looking image. Now we know that megapixels don't determine overall picture quality, but if you're concerned about zooming and cropping, you do have a lot more room to work with on the Moto X. But as far as actual image quality goes, both cameras are capable of taking some excellent looking shots given the right lighting conditions, but in most situations the 5X typically produces much cooler images over the warmer tones of the Moto X. The same can also be said about the front-facing cameras as well. Whether you prefer a cooler or warmer look is a matter of personal preference, but where the 5X truly shines is in overall color reproduction and dynamic range. The colors aren't quite as overly saturated as the Moto X, and areas like shadows and highlights hold a lot more detail on the 5X, and the difference is especially noticeable in lower light or high contrast situations. The biggest advantage of owning a Nexus has always lied in the software, and with the Nexus 5X you're getting one of the first devices to ship with Android 6.0 Marshmallow, and since it's a Nexus, it's the way Google intended it to be, so no skin and no extra bloatware. The Moto X is on 5.1.1 Lollipop currently, but has never been too far behind with updates. The experience is about as pure as you're going to get without being a Nexus, and the Moto X historically received updates very shortly after Google rolled them out, but we'll have to wait and see if that's still the case under the ownership of Lenovo. Aesthetically, the software experience between these two are practically identical because nothing really changed in terms of looks between Marshmallow and Lollipop, with the exception of the new vertical scrolling app drawer, but that change can be had on any device running the Google Now launcher. What really separates these two experiences is the new features of Marshmallow on the 5X and custom Motorola features on the Moto X. Obviously, all of the enhancements and features of Marshmallow like user-defined app permissions, Doze, and the contextually aware Now on Tap will all be coming to the Moto X when it gets Marshmallow, but until that happens, these are all features that currently make owning a brand new Nexus phone special. The Moto X, on the other hand, has its own features that make it special, and if you're a longtime Moto X user, then you'll know just how useful many of these features can be. You can do things like call upon your Moto X with any custom phrase of your choice, chop twice for the flashlight, or peek at notifications that are subtly pulsating on the display. Some of these features may sound really minor or trivial, but once you get used to them, they become features you don't want to go without. With the Nexus 5X starting at $379 and the Moto X Pure Edition at $400, there's only a $20 difference between these two devices. They're both very affordable smartphones that do a lot of things well, and you can't go wrong with either one, but for me personally, I would go with the Moto X Pure Edition. You're getting a larger, higher resolution display, better build quality, micro SD card expansion, a near stock Android experience with some very useful enhancements by Motorola, and endless customization with Moto Maker. Of course, the Nexus 5X has its own advantages too, like the fingerprint sensor, USB Type-C, stock Android, and a great camera, but when you're looking at it from a perspective of value, the Moto X Pure Edition is the better bang for your buck. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this comparison of the Nexus 5X versus the Moto X Pure Edition. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. And also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. And don't forget to check the website as well for more in-depth coverage, AndroidAuthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.